I'm not an AI expert, right? Let's get that cards on the table right now. I mean, you could half my team would argue whether I'm a procurement or a commercial expert. We could at least have a discussion, have a conversation about that one. I'm not an AI expert. What I do want to do is just share a bit of insight, a bit of learning that kind of I and the team have taken on board as we go through and navigate kind of our AI exploration journey. Bit of context. I had a dry run with my wife yesterday evening at the presentation, and she described it as mildly entertaining. And actually, for my wife, who has very little interest in either commercial or AI, that's makes praise, to be fair. So a bit about Smart DCC. I don't want to spend too long on this slide, but it is important, I think, and useful just to kind of ground the conversation this afternoon. So Smart DCC are a regulated monopoly, so we're regulated by Ofgem, and we're responsible for smart meter enrolment, so making sure that smart meters are in everybody's homes and that they work. For the operation and the maintenance of the network itself, so allowing and enabling the smart meters in homes to talk to and send data to energy companies and other users of that data. It's deemed national critical infrastructure, so we have really high security standards that we have to meet and maintain. And fundamentally, we have to do so and operate the network effectively and efficiently as possible. So being funded by energy companies and being part of that regulated monopoly, a small proportion of everybody's bill, anyone that pays an energy bill, goes towards the maintenance of the smart meter network and infrastructure. So about £29 of your energy bill goes towards funding Smart DCC and the network. So to that end, it's really important that we do drive value for money in everything that we do, that we do operate efficiently and economically. Spend around £650 million a year and execute over kind of 150 sourcing events. And that's quite high given the volume of spend. And predominantly that's because Ofgem see value for money or achieving value for money is through competitive tenders and negotiation. So we do a lot of sourcing events that kind of vary from hundreds of millions down to kind of byros in the tens of thousands. We often we have license obligations that mean we have to compete pretty much all of our opportunities. The other really important thing to mention is that most of the network is outsourced. It's delivered by external parties and third parties. So we work with over 300 different suppliers, hence the number of sourcing events, and we manage a contract portfolio of kind of over £5 billion. So some useful context there that I think will hopefully ground the conversation as we go through. So I just want to kind of pause and talk about some of the potential of AI. And to be fair, if you only have to put AI into Google or ask one of your chat GPTs or your Copilot, and you'll get rafts and rafts of information and far more detail than I'll kind of go through today. But I just wanted to pick out a couple of snippets that as a kind of that I see as the most exciting areas, particularly within procurement and commercial. So predictive procurement, I guess this is the transition, I think, from a reactive world that we're in today, where the business are approaching us and saying, I need that thing yesterday, can you go out and get it for me? To a more predictive and proactive approach, where we're using things, or AI is looking at things like market trends and spend data and consumption data internally to start to get on the front foot and be more proactive, be that kind of strategic partner to the business and approaching them and saying, this is a solution that will alleviate the specific problem or issue that you've got. So really transforming from a reactive kind of knee-jerk, we'll go and buy this for you, to approaching the business and actually being seen as more of that strategic partner. And I think AI is going to help, in terms of that making those data-driven decisions, hugely important. The second piece is around kind of autonomous negotiation bots. So we kind of hear this a lot, and I think we're a little way off that in terms of kind of the more strategic, complex negotiations, right? I don't think we're quite at the stage where we could have two bots kind of buy and sale side and hands off and just watch it work. But certainly for kind of more transactional, low value spend, we're already seeing quite a lot of progress in this space. Things like suggesting alternative commercial models, for example, benchmarking prices and information both internally and externally. And so, like I say, loads of big strides in kind of terms of those low spend, more transactional activity. We're seeing a lot more of a kind of hands off, let AI do its thing with a bit more guidance and supervision from humans. Cognitive contract management. So what I mean by that, I guess, is lifting, and Pete mentioned it earlier, kind of lifting the contract from off of the page or the PDF and starting to leverage data to do things like identify risks within a contract, pull out obligations and track those.
compare contracts across your portfolio to identify where you may have kind of higher or lower indemnity clauses than you might expect, or kind of as benchmarks are telling you. So really starting to suggest and kind of using AI to enhance not only kind of the future contracts that you're creating, but also bring them to life a little bit more. And then the final bit that I think is really interesting and exciting is around kind of ethical and sustainable procurement and shifting it towards the kind of core and the heart of procurement activity. So moving it away from, I guess, more of a tick box exercise to something that's fundamentally built into the process. So using AI to validate supplier credentials, doing things like scenario modeling, so exploring alternative options and then understanding the kind of, from a sustainability perspective, the impact that certain solutions might have. And using it to inform supplier selection, for example, what's the carbon footprint going to be like if we select this option over that option? So really bringing it to the forefront of kind of thinking and procurement. So there's just a handful of examples I think that we're already kind of seeing, and as I say, some of this stuff works really well, and other bits are evolving rapidly. I do think there's a bit of a reality check, or there certainly was within DCC about before we kind of talk about and embrace some of the potential within AI. And I think certainly when we reflected internally, there's no doubt that AI is transformative, right? We use ChatGPT, Copilot day to day. It's transformative, and it will, and the kind of applications will only increase. But I think one of the penny dropping moments, if that's the expression, was around appreciating that AI is a multiplier. And where you have good competencies, good practice within your organization, AI will multiply that, right? And it will make those even better than you have today. Where you have poor practices and where your shortfalls and shortcomings are as an organization, AI will multiply that as well, right? It won't get us out of a hole. It will just make those problems worse potentially and exacerbate them. And so when we step back at DCC, we recognize that there's a number of different things that we need to address in order to really embrace the potential of AI. So the first along the left is kind of around fragmented data. So we still do have pockets of this, but we have data spread across everywhere, right? We have stuff in Ivalio, which is fantastic, and that data source is getting better. We still have, contracts in cupboards. We have them on SharePoint. We have them people's hard drives and OneDrives in some instances, right? So having fragmented data that's inaccessible to the AI, to the agent that you're using, is going to limit the application for it. So there's a real hampering there. Duplicate supplier entities, unreconciled spend makes kind of realizing the potential of AI really difficult. Process sprawl. So we definitely have this internally, but where we have processes that are not followed as kind of a standard approach. So people are doing their own thing, kind of ad hoc adherence to them, if you like. And as a result, they've become over-engineered. Workflows don't work. People are kind of taking them into their own hands and cut corners where they see opportunities to without rolling out those efficiencies. And you end up in a position where everybody does something slightly differently. That's really difficult to get control over. And it just makes your fragmented data piece even worse, right? It exacerbates the issue further. So process sprawl is definitely something that we noticed was a real problem within DCC. Underutilized platforms is a really interesting one. So there's two parts to this, if you like. There's one, having multiple different platforms and systems that could do the same thing, but you're not necessarily using them for those purposes, or just having features and kind of applications within existing platforms that you're paying for, but you're just not using. We certainly have that. And then there's instances across the organization where users aren't trained to the same standard and same degree. So even those people that are using it well aren't sharing that knowledge with other people, and so you end up with people using different systems for cross purposes as well. Again, exacerbating the process sprawl and fragmented data piece. The final bit that I think, again, it makes each of the points worse and highlights some of the issues is around poor governance. So we see across, and this isn't just Smart DCC, but a lot of the organisations that I engage with have real difficulty with accountability across organisations, being really clear about who's accountable for what. And particularly with data ownership as well, it leads to kind of untrusted data sources. People aren't sure whether they can believe the information that they're being told. Ambiguous policies. So it's within DCC, we have a license that's written by Ofgem and the Department of Energy and Net Zero. So we have a huge amount of obligations, both on us and on our suppliers. And sometimes we're not really clear on what that actually means, how that translates to how we can carry out our day-to-day activity, which only leads to some of the other problems being even worse. And weak enforcement as well. Do we have the right guardrails in place, the right governance, the right proactive assurance as well, to prevent any of these from getting worse? So I think it's an interesting point, and I would kind of ask people to step back and reflect on where they are, kind of, and does some of this resonate with them within their organisation? So to that end, we did a bit of soul searching, and we've kind of come across or pulled together 3 foundational pillars, if you like, or 3 things that we see are fundamental to be able to kind of starting to unlock the potential of AI. And a lot of this is the reverse of some of the elements that I've just spoken to you about. So having good data quality and accessibility is critical. So making sure that people are following, and it links to the process discipline, but making sure that people are following processes that are laid out, that they're clear, that that they work for individuals as well, so they're efficient and they're streamlined as much as possible, and people are aware of what they should be doing and when they should be doing it. I'd always say with regards to the process piece is kind of standardise before you look to automate and to digitalise. Make sure that everybody's really clear, well trained in understanding of exactly what they're responsible for and how they need to execute those different processes. And then the data quality piece will get there, right, in time. So good process discipline, having things like standard operating procedures, templates, playbooks, all of the stuff that's kind of foundational and fairly basic is really important to improving process discipline. And in time, your data quality will improve, and then enabling kind of AI agents and bots accessibility to that data is a part of the core foundation. The final pillar on here, I think, is slightly kind of adjacent, if you like, to the other 2 core, and this is around maximising the existing tools you have. So something that there's huge buzz around AI, right, and there's a lot of pressure. Top down and from around us to really be harnessing it. If we don't embrace it now, we'll get left behind, right? We hear that a lot. The reality is you'll get far greater bang for your buck in the short and medium term if you just maximize the tools that you have available today, right? Think about the features that you may be paying for that you're not getting the most out of. Think about if you can't move to a single source to pay solution or source to contract solution like iValuer, integrating the systems and tools you do have, right? Automating those processes, making sure that you are getting the most out of the tools you have today before you start to think about, okay, how can I overlay AI, will give you far greater bang for your buck, as I say, in the short and the medium term, than thinking about AI and how we can make the most of it. I kind of think of it as, well, I don't think about it, but I read somewhere that kind of AI in this respect is a bit like trying to build or without these foundations, is like trying to build a skyscraper on sand. It will stand initially, but over time it's just gonna sink. So to that end, I guess we kind of started to think about where are we as a procurement function at DCC on this kind of maturity curve, and I've labelled it a procurement maturity curve, but I think you can apply it to your organisation, you can apply it to your function, and probably even down to a process level. Each individual process probably that you and your teams carry out will be somewhere along this line, which probably should be a curve. So at DCC, kind of 12, 18 months ago, we were very manual, right? We would carry out procurements via email. We would evaluate on Excel spreadsheets, and we would collect our information and data that way. We implemented iValuer February 24, so kind of 18 months ago or so now, and kind of began to embrace and step into that digital space, right? Having a core source to contract solution in our case, but having a core system and tool to work from. And admittedly, with fairly low adoption initially, right? We went on a long kind of, it took a long time to get people to really step into and embrace this digitalization of the ways of working, which did a bit of, it kind of, there was a bit of head scratching initially as to, why can people not see the benefit of moving away from manual spreadsheets to a system? But you have to appreciate it's quite a big change for a lot of individuals, and everybody goes through that change curve at different speeds. So a really important learning for us was around how do we take everybody on that journey and really boost adoption before we start to move into that optimized space. So this is where we have our core system or systems that are integrated. We have adoption is relatively high and good, and we have people working in a standardized approach. So we start to really roll out those processes, make sure everybody's really clear on what their obligations are, who's accountable, and you start to really build up that clean data that we mentioned at the start, which is so important. So you kind of move across that curve, and that's when we can start to think about, okay, and how can we now start to overlay AI? Where can AI help us, particularly in those processes where we've already reached the optimized? So I think it's really important to stress that I'd say, candidly, DCC are probably, for the majority, still in the digital to optimized phase. And some processes are still manual, and some are ready, as we'll go on to kind of to be AI enabled. But it's not a kind of linear, everything moves together at once, or it's certainly not been my experience and our experience. But certainly bringing those processes along the journey is when we can start to think about how do we, these are optimized, right? We have them, they're digitalized, they're standardized, they're working well. Now, how can we embrace and look to leverage AI and make the most of that to free up some time to think about how we bring the other processes along the journey as well. So again, I'd kind of encourage everybody to reflect and think about where they are within their specific organization. So we did promise to talk about some AI, some applications, some uses, and some of the things that we're embracing and using at DCC. And if anybody's been along to kind of any of the iValue and Now pieces, any of the webinars they do, any of the kind of breakfasts and what have you, they've got some fantastic videos that will demo some of this stuff far better than I'm going to articulate and show you with screenshots that you're probably not going to be able to see at the back anyway. But I'll just talk you through some of the use cases that we are using, and we're already seeing a lot of kind of improvements to speed, quality, and consistency of our processes. They're not moonshots, right? As we spoke about earlier, they're not things that are going to revolutionize the organization, but they are things that over the course of 150 sourcing events really start to compound and take out time for the teams to focus on the more value-add activity. So the first screenshot that you probably can't see is all around the RFP proofreader. There's a worse one than this, and it's not even a screenshot of the right thing, but bear with me. So what we have here is an example of how AI is built into the iValue platform, a feature called RFP or RFX Proofreader, and it's saving us huge amounts of time and effort already. So as you can see here, when you go to prepare an RFP of some description, there's a process box and a summary box. And the process box just wants you to explain to the supplier what is the process you're going to run, right? How many rounds of negotiation are you going to do? What are the timelines you're working towards? What's expected of the supplier, and what are you going to offer them through the process? And then in the summary box, you're just summarizing what it is we're trying to buy. Really straightforward and simple. And what we've got built into iValue is two different boxes, right? There's an RFP, a proofread process and a proofread summary. And if you click that box, two things happen. The first thing is we get almost like a tracked changes style piece in the summary and the process box. And quite quickly, it's just highlighted some improvements to grammar and clarity. So either the AI bot within iValue is really quickly just pointing out some additions and some amendments that it suggests we make to improve the clarity and the grammar of our process or summary, depending on which one we've pressed. So that's the first thing. The second thing we see is Eva pops up and actually comes up with several suggestions of ways in which we can improve the clarity or prove what we've written in terms of the process. So in this example on the left-hand side, it said there's a lack of clarity in the intro, that we've not been clear about our project goal and scopes. The selection schedule is unclear, and there's some missing information. So there's loads of info there that Eva's suggesting. You can, and it's up to the procurement manager as to whether they kind of decide to act on that or not. And the same with the kind of tracked changes style. We can ignore them or we can embrace them. But quite quickly, I hope you can appreciate that, one, it takes a lot of time and effort of proofreading and potentially going up to kind of managers to proofread some of the documentation, but also improving the clarity and the quality of the tender documents we're putting out. So hopefully reducing the kind of clarification questions we get down the line and just speeding up the process generally. So not a moonshot, but something that works really well and is really clear and easy to understand. So that's the first one that we're starting to use and embrace. The second one that we're using at the moment is the supplier finder. And so again, a really simple, the way it looks in iValue are really straightforward and simple. There's just this green button again here, which is find suppliers with Eva. And what it does, so in this instance, we're starting a sourcing project and we're looking for some SharePoint technical consultancy in this example. And quite quickly, if we press the find suppliers with Eva, what it will do is it will then suggest suppliers that we may wish to invite to this procurement project based on previous projects that are similar, based on the taxonomy or the category, depends on how you've kind of set up your sourcing project. But quite quickly, it will suggest suppliers you may wish to invite, and with the click of a button, you can do that. The next thing that Eva will ask you in the chat here is whether you'd like it to search externally for other suppliers that may be able to provide the service for you. So you can ask it to go away and do that for you, or you can be more specific and say, can you focus on UK suppliers or whatever other parameters that you have in this particular project. And again, Eva will come back and suggest some suppliers. If you've already onboarded them within the platform, great, you can ask Eva to add it and they'll add it straight to your, the AI agent will add it straight to your project. If you haven't, you can ask Eva to start the onboarding process and it will start engaging with the supplier to get them onboarded for you so you can then add them to the project. So again, really quickly, just saving some of that administrative task of thinking about who do I need to invite to this opportunity, making sure that we don't miss any suppliers or if we've forgotten any, just kind of double checking that we've included everybody we want to, and then having a wider look across. So we're not kind of just narrowly inviting the same people to the same tender opportunities. We are continually scouring the market to see if there's any other suitable providers of that, in this instance, consultancy. The last one, and this is the worst screenshot to date, so if the other two have been difficult, this one you'll struggle with as well, but bear with me. So the final kind of example of the AI features that I just want to share with you is around the questionnaire template. So as you can't see in this instance, but what we have here is an instructions piece where you're basically asking the agent what the questionnaire that you'd like to generate. So what we put in here in really simple English is, can you create a climate change maturity questionnaire focusing on UK suppliers? And what it will do, and if you then click the generate template, again, that kind of green button, there's a load of XML code that is there. And actually the bit I should have screenshotted is the questionnaire template that it then spits out at the end. But there's a series of questions related to climate change regulation, and a procurement manager can go in and they can tweak, they can delete, they can add to it, they can be more specific in the instructions and really play around with those questionnaires. So for an organisation like Smart DCC, which is really heavily regulated, and we have a huge number of licence conditions both on us and on our suppliers as well, being able to issue these questionnaires really quickly and generate questionnaires for all sorts of weird and wonderful things that we get asked from Ofgem and the Department of Energy and Net Zero, but being able to ping those out and do kind of annual, quarterly attestations to check our suppliers are still compliant with things like modern slavery statements and other bits and pieces, really, really useful. And then obviously the results we get back, we can then store those as part of the supplier records as well. So again, something that would be done via email, kind of mass email, and then going into an inbox, being sorted, filtered out, and what have you, saving huge amounts of time, and also just generating better quality questionnaires as well, and not relying on necessarily the same questions each time that are out of date. So they're just the three features that I wanted to kind of call out as being, I was going to say live, they're actually in our pre-production environment at the moment for some internal political reasons, but we've been playing around with them and can already see a huge amount of benefit that's going to be delivered from putting them live. So just a bit about, I guess, the future then, and some of the things we're working on and working with. And Pete, it was a brilliant segue right at the end of your talk around the kind of the use case exploration through the AI working group. So we're a member of the working group, so we work with TSM and some of the other customers here to really explore some of those use cases that we've got as an organisation, but we're not quite able to, that aren't quite available or haven't really been thought about or considered. So we work really well as a group. We've had a couple of sessions and kind of Ryan has kind of taken away a lot of those to work on those up. But really exploring some of the use cases and opportunities there, and hopefully getting ready to pilot them as and when they're ready to do so. So that's really exciting and really important. The next bit is around, I mentioned at the start that predominantly, we work with a lot of suppliers, over 300 suppliers, and within that supply base we have suppliers like AWS, Google, Microsoft, Accenture, IBM, loads of organizations that are at the forefront and are the kind of cutting edge of AI and tech. And we're really starting to work a lot more closely with those organizations, again, to come up with use cases and exploration. So we had a really interesting conversation the other week with a supplier who they've created their own AI workbench, but essentially looking at tail spend data. And they're using an AI agent along with some sort of ocular I don't know, another piece of software and tool to review invoice data, right? So completely non-uniform data. Every invoice that we get is kind of unique and different. And using the agent to not only look at the invoice and then identify who the supplier is, identify the taxonomy and the commodity, and then to pull out some of those line items as well and start to categorize spend data. So really quickly, they had some really powerful data information related to tail spend that we can then use to form category strategies to start to get greater spend under control. So some really exciting and interesting opportunities within that space as well. So really exciting. The third and kind of final bit on there, and it goes back to, I guess, the reality check piece that I mentioned at the start, is around making sure that we do prioritize, kind of continuing along that maturity curve whilst, getting excited about the applications of AI is really important. So we recognize that we're further along that curve in some instances than others. So making sure that we really focus on getting as many of those processes and ways of working to the kind of optimized, ready for AI enablement, while still focusing on the benefits that we can get from AI in those processes that are ready and those teams that are prepared to embrace the AI. So I don't know how I'm doing for time. This is my last slide. I think I've rattled through it, so I'm happy to take any questions. But I think there's kind of three bits, I suppose, that I think are really important to take away. The first is that AI, I mentioned at the start, AI is a multiplier, and where you have strengths as an organization, AI will multiply those, right, and make them even better. But where you have weaknesses and where you haven't got the foundations right, it will multiply those and make things worse. So I would really encourage focusing on things like system adoption, data quality, process discipline, those foundational pillars I mentioned earlier, before you really start to think about, now how do I get the most out of AI? And the final bit that I just wanted to mention, again, a nod to the working group and just partnerships in general, everybody in this room, right? There's far more power, and we'll get far further along that journey quicker through strategic collaboration, right? Everybody working together, sharing use cases, sharing ideas, sharing lessons learned from transformation programs and digital transformation programs and those sorts of events will get us along that maturity curve far quicker. So prioritize strategic collaboration would be the final thing I'd leave you with. And that's your lot.